Your Love Is Not Enough, that's the Manics, and I was very lucky to be standing at the side of the stage and watching them singing along and looking at the audience as well. And I said to James Dean Bradfield, you went down a storm.
Yeah, I mean, kind of, it was a bit of a shock to the system because the last 2 years or so we've been picking up gigs around the world in Europe and Japan and Australia and stuff. And I think when I stepped on stage, my legs wobbled a bit because was it 30,000 people?
I couldn't see the end of the people.
I was like, I'm not used to this anymore.
It was just like, my goodness, where does it stop?
I've taken a break from all this. So.
Congratulations on a blinder of an album. It really is. Rewind the film with another one coming hot on the heels of it.
Yeah, I don't know what the hell we're trying to do. You know, we're really trying to kind of poleaxe ourselves before we get out the starting gate by announcing even before we release this album that another one's coming out next year. But we were in the bunker, our J.D. Salinger-esque bunker in Cardiff, and so we've been living in this bubble for 2 years, and we got halfway through the process, and we tried to put the record together. You know, we tried to do our imaginary track listings, which is always really exciting, and we realised it just looked like a mess. And then, kind of before our eyes, we could see we'd made two separate albums, you know, distinctly, and we were like, oh, why have we done this? So yeah, our subconscious must have been going into overdrive, you know.
Well, you're making a lot of work for yourself because you'll be doing the rounds again with Futurology, won't you?
Yeah, we will. I mean, kind of, look, you know, we haven't played a gig in Britain, we played Hyde Park on the weekend. Before that, we hadn't played in Britain for 2 years, and, you know, I've got a young toddler at home, so I've been around for 2 years. So it'll kind of be good to get out there, even though I think we might have to take an army of physiotherapists onto all this, you know, because I'm 44 now, you know.
And you recorded it 2 places in Wales, your own studio and
Rockfield,
beautiful place.
Yeah.
And then over to Germany.
Yeah, I mean, kind of, we actually, you know, when you talk about Hans, people associate it with, you know, Bowie's Berlin period and Iggy Pop and Acton Baby U2. But Hans is actually a building complex, so we weren't actually in the studio that kind of Iggy and you know, Bowie recorded in. But we didn't go over for the Berlin shtick. We went over there because there's a guy that works in that building called Alex Silva, who's the Italian stallion, we call him. He's a Welsh-Italian Cardiff boy. They engineered the Holy Bible, and he works there with a German artist called Herbert Grönemeyer. And we just wanted to kind of because the other half, you know, the other record, Futurology, has kind of got a small connection to the Holy Bible. It just seemed like a very kind of like illogical thing to do, to go and work with a guy that we worked, you know, on the Holy Bible with in Berlin. And it was snowing when we were there, so it kind of felt magical in a kind of Ip Crest-file kind of way, you know.
And is it true that you had 35 songs?
I think it's up to 37 now.
Gosh.
Yeah, it's a bit silly.
Well, that's enough for another couple of albums afterwards.
Yeah, I know. The thing is, it doesn't, you know, you've got to make sure they're good albums. So I think it's weird because you have all these tracks left over and you think, wow, we've got lots of B-sides left, but you don't need B-sides anymore, do you?
No, not at all.
And that's kind of, you know, you don't need an extra track for the 12-inch or whatever. So it's a bit sad when you kind of realise those things.
But this is an album that you have to listen to in the order from start. You listen to it as a whole because I think it's a wonderful listen. Don't just pick out.
No, I think so, but I think that about every record, you know. I'm very unreconstructed in the way that I digest music, you know, and I'm not saying I'm right, I'm just saying I'm an old dog that cannot be taught new tricks. So I can't do shuffle and all that kind of, you know, nonsense. So I do listen, when I get an album, I play it from track to track at least twice to give it a chance.
OK, well, we have asked you to pick some tunes.
Yes.
And what are you going to play for us first?
I think I'm going to go for a track called A Girl Called Johnny by the Waterboys, which is, you know, one of my favourite songs of all time.
And he's such a character as well, Matt Scott. An interesting bloke.
He is, yeah. I mean, kind of, I've read his book, you know, The Adventures of a Waterboy. And I get a small mention in it because I had this very kind of weird thing that happened. Around about 1985, I wrote him a fan letter. It was about 5 o'clock in the morning, the sun was rising in the valleys, it was in the summer, and I was listening to, like, In a Pagan Place and the Waterboys album as well. And I wrote him this I had this kind of like, you know, this splurge of emotion. I wrote him a fan letter and I burnt the edges of it to make it look antiquated and like and stuff. And then I sent him this letter. And then we cut around about 2008. I'm on a plane coming back from playing a festival in Serbia, I think. And suddenly, Mike Scott stood above me, kind of like, you know, boarding the plane, and he says to me, I got your fan letter, you know.
Wow.
And I got these chills down the back of my neck.
Tingly, yeah.
And kind of like, and I was just like, I just didn't know what to say. I was just like, really? Somebody put you up to this? And then he quoted a bit of the letter back to me, which was kind of made me really cringe with pain because I talked about kind of like the stars with the kind of the commas and the full stops that Jack Kerouac never used, and you will see my name in lights one day kind of letter. So kind of that is a very strange experience, but I think this is an amazing song.
But you made your mark, and good. A girl called Johnny, the Waterboys. That's the Waterboys and a girl called Johnny. Now, Kate Le Bon is on the album. You've also got Lucy Rose, who magnificent. I saw her, introduced her on stage actually a couple of weeks ago, and I think she's a cracking talent. And also Richard Hawley. Now, you met him at a Shirley Bassey gig.
Yeah, we did actually. Yeah, God, yeah. How do you know that?
Oof.
Yes, and then we kind of reconvened to the bar, and I haven't got many musicians in my phone. You know, kind of like it's like my dad said. You know, I don't know carpenters kind of thing. But kind of, I really connected with Richey when I met him and stuff, and I think we connected about love of place that we come from, and
also the fact that your lovely dad who I met the other day, and his dad, Teddy Boy Bikers.
They were, yeah. I mean, Dad was a kind of strange biker because he was a fighter, I must admit, but he never really drunk, my father. So kind of he was in a gang called the Cowboys. Anyway, so kind of we talked about our dads and our love of place and how we feel as if, you know, we owe the place we come from a lot. Talked about music a lot as well. And when we were doing this song in the studio, I just knew I couldn't get down there. You know, I knew that we needed somebody to bring the man into the Manics kind of thing, and you know, and his voice is fitted on the track straight away. He was the first person I thought of, and he did it in 3 takes, and he did it in 1, to be honest. You know, we just got 2 safety takes off him, and it was just an amazing experience, I gotta say. And
interesting for him because they're not his lyrics.
No, I knew he'd buy into the thing of it's not the song, it's the singer kind of thing. You know, kind of I knew that, and I knew he'd connect with the lyrics a tiny bit as well. You know, I think he's talked about loss quite a lot himself and everything. And I just knew he'd connect with him. And he's been a musician for a long time. He's kind of one of those guys that kind of like, that you know you can trust. You know, you can really find his way around a song and he'll do the right thing. He won't do an ego splash on it, you know.
Not at all. And he's very grounded and down to earth, isn't he?
Yeah, he's a good solid drinker. He enjoys drinking. He doesn't try to spoil it by going too fast. You know, he enjoys the pint.
And he's very proud of the fact, every time I see him, he's going, 7 months now without a fag.
I know.
I did it the hard way. Cold turkey.
He was saying willpower. Kind of like, but it's kind of weird, you know, when kind of you see us with each other, kind of it looks like Rennie and Renata, you know. It's just like, you know, he's up there and I'm down here.
Okay, well, let's listen to the title track from the album, the one that features Richard Hawley, and this is Rewind the Film. Rewind the Film featuring Richard Hawley, title track from the Manics' new album, and my guest, James Dean Bradfield. Right, are you into literature? You obviously are.
Yes, I do like my books. But I think I was really into books because, you know, for a long time, and perhaps even now, when I was reading, especially when I was about 15 and stuff, say I was reading something like Nausea by Jean-Paul Sartre, you know, I was aware when I was reading it that I was perhaps understanding a quarter of it, but I was still enjoying it. So I really did enjoy books, and perhaps people might think I'm only understanding a quarter of what I'm reading now, but I think that's the secret to actually enjoying reading, that you don't really have to understand everything, but you can let it resonate and perhaps try and decode things, you know, at your own pace.
And when do you read? When do you find time to read?
It's just kind of, it really is late at night. I don't want to do the sob story thing, but I've got to the age where I'm waking up with a book on my chest, and on tour, you know, kind of if you kind of, it's just so easy to get in your bunk and just create another world in your bunk, you know, and just read. I take about 4 books. I've always got about 6 books on the go, and it takes me ages to finish them because, you know, kind of I just move on to the next one. I come back to the other, then I go refresh myself. So kind of like it's just kind of always love books. And all the Manics it's always been a bedrock for us.
I was going to say you and Nicky and Sean.
And Richey as well.
And Richey, yeah, of course. Yeah. Do you have similar tastes?
I think myself and Nick kind of had some similar tastes, though. Nick was ahead of me, definitely. Sean was in kind of like reading about classical musical history and stuff when he was young, because he was studying trumpet and stuff. Kind of, when Richey was about 16 and stuff, he was always ahead of the game. He was reading J.G. Ballard before any of us, He was reading Dutch Esky, before us, kind of thing. And I was always really proud. I introduced him to Arthur Rimbaud, A Season in Hell. I was like, yes, I've given him a book that he should have read, and I've given it to him, kind of thing. I was very much... Nick was into the beats a bit, but I was a bit more into the beats. But Nick was really wildly read, He was reading so much. So it was big for all of us. And Nick's big brother, Pat Jones, who's a playwright, he introduced me to things like Howl by Allen Ginsberg, lots of Gregory Corso, and lots of Kerouac, which is kind of a point of entry for 15-year-olds, to get into the beat generation and stuff. So it was... But to be honest... I got to say, the thing that introduced us to books were musicians. I remember Matt Johnson mentoring Nausea by John Paul Sartre, and that's why I read it. I remember reading Lorca because of Joe Strummer, and then kind of remember kind of Grail Marcus connecting all these things in Lipstick Traces, and it's kind of some music felt really educational back then, it really did. So kind of, in a strange way, music led me to literature in a way.
Well, in a moment, I'll ask you to read something for us. But before that, Pete Wiley, Story of the Blues.
Yes.
And you must have been tiny when this came out.
I loved this record. I absolutely loved it. I think that kind of... What was that expression that was used in the 80s? Is, blue-eyed soul kind of thing, And obviously you're talking about when it's more from a white perspective, I suppose. And kind of, I think, Pete Wiley, especially in this era, his voice had so much soul to it, and he had so much abandon and so much purity to it. And I could have picked anybody from the Crucial Three. I could have picked, the Buddy Men. I could have picked Julian Cope solo stuff, because I love Julian Cope's solo stuff. And I love the Mighty War. And I've met Pete a couple of times. And
did you get a word in edgeways?
It was price for education. And I remember once when he was Heartbreakers Liverpool era, mid-90s, when he was doing a comeback. He was dressed in a white suit, and we had a walking cane, and he went, "You stole my sound." I was like, "No, Pete, I stole your producer." Because Mike Edges kind of produced Story of the Blues, who I think is he's an unmentioned genius in British production. And I just think this is an absolutely genius song. It's just got so much longing in it, and it's got just very optimistic defiance in it as well. It's just an amazing song.
Let's listen to it. The Mighty War, Story of the Blues. Mighty War, Story of the Blues, James Dean Bradfield, my guest. And I love the B-side, where it starts off, and that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Because he did that thing, didn't he, where kind of like, on Comeback, where there was another version of Comeback, I think.
With Howard Jones Can Have It, Come Back. He did a parody, didn't he, for WEA?
He did, yeah. So kind of, I could have picked a lot of songs from the war, like Comeback, Down by the Docks, the lyrics in that, I don't want charity, but just half a chance, and it's all up to you, it's all up to you. Down by the Docks, the talking turned. He's a great lyricist as well.
3 Minutes to Midnight. I love as well.
He's given me a earful a couple of times, I must say.
Oh, he would. He's not backwards in coming forwards. What are you going to read?
Well, we might have to do a couple of takes on this. You might have to just say, James is going to try this again. This is from a book I read in the 90s. It's called We Wish to Inform You That Tomorrow We Will Be Killed with Our Families. Here we go, sorry. It's by somebody called Philip Gerevich, who was a journalist that went and lived in Rwanda post the Rwandan genocide for a year. And I think it kind of like this passage just tells you about the kind of, I suppose, the fatigue that people get when they think about intervention, whether they think it should happen or whether it shouldn't happen. And I think it really illustrates that people kind of are tired of being right, and they're more tired of being wrong, and perhaps they just don't want to get involved. And I think it says this in this piece, and it's it's a terribly hard subject to try and navigate, kind of thing. But I think this kind of shows all the counter arguments that are available to us. Okay. In September of 1997, shortly before General Secretary Kofi Annan muzzled him against testifying before the Belgian Senate, General Delay, formerly of UNAMIR, went on Canadian television and said of his tour in Rwanda, I'm fully responsible for the decisions of the 10 Belgian soldiers dying, of others dying, of several of my soldiers being injured and falling sick because we ran out of medical supplies, of 56 Red Cross people being killed, of 2 million people becoming displaced and refugees, and 1 million Rwandans being killed, because the mission failed and I consider myself intimately involved with that responsibility. Dallaire refused to pass the buck to the UN system. Instead, he passed it on to the member states of the Security Council and of the General Assembly. If, in the face of genocide, governments fear placing their soldiers at risk, he said, then don't send soldiers, send Boy Scouts, which is basically what the world did in the refugee camps. Dallaire was in a uniform as he faced the camera. His greying hair was closely cropped. He held his square jaw firmly outthrust. His chest was dappled with decorations, but he spoke with some agitation, and his carefully measured phrases did nothing to mask his sense of injury or his fury. He said, I haven't even started my real mourning of the apathy and the absolute detachment of the international community, and particularly of the Western world, from the plight of Rwandans. Because fundamentally, to be very candid and soldierly, who the hell cared about Rwanda? I mean, face it, essentially, how many people will really still remember the genocide in Rwanda? We know the genocide of the Second World War because the whole outfit was involved. But who really is involved in the Rwandan genocide? Who comprehends that more people were killed, injured and displaced in 3.5 months in Rwanda, when in the whole of the Yugoslavian campaign, in which we poured 60,000 troops and the whole of the Western world was there, and we are pouring millions in here, still trying to solve the problem? How much is really being done to solve the Rwandan problem? Who is grieving for Rwanda and really living it and living with the consequences? I mean, there are hundreds of Rwandans, whom I knew personally, where I found slaughtered with their families complete and bodies up to here, villages totally wiped out. And we made all that information available daily, and the international community kept watching. The utopian premise of the Genocide Convention had been that a moral imperative to prevent efforts to exterminate whole people should be the overriding interest animating the action of an international community of autonomous states. This is a radical notion, fundamentally at odds, as so much of the international experiment has proven to be. With the principle of sovereignty, states have never acted for purely disinterested humanitarian reasons. The novel idea was that the protection of humanity was in every state's interest, and it was well understood in the aftermath of World War II that action against genocide would require a willingness to use force and to risk the lives of one's own. The belief was that the price to the world of such a risk would not be as great as the price of inaction. But whose world were the drafters of the Genocide Convention and the Refugee Conventions, which soon followed, thinking of? I first travelled to Rwanda via Brussels in May 1995. The European papers were full of commemorative articles marking the 50th anniversary of VE Day. The Herald Tribune had reprinted its entire front page of the May the 8th, 1945, and the articles impressed me with the fighting spirit. Smash the Germans, conquer, then bring justice, then reconstruct. The European Wall Street Journal carried news of a poll which found that 50 years after the fact, 65% of Germans believed that it was a good thing that their country had been defeated. And I wondered, can we imagine such an outcome for any of the wars of today? Rwanda had presented the world with the most unambiguous case of genocide since Hitler's war against the Jews, and the world sent blankets, beans and bandages to camps controlled by the killers, apparently hoping that everybody would behave nicely in the future. The West post-Holocaust pledge that genocide would never again be tolerated proved to be hollow. And all the fine sentiments inspired by the memory of Auschwitz, the problem remains that denouncing evil is a far cry from doing good. On television, Major General Dallaire was politic. He blamed no governments by name. He said, the real question is, what does the international community really want the UN to do? He said, the UN simply wasn't given the tools. And he said, we did not want to take the Rwandan armed forces and the Interahamwe. Listening to him, I was reminded of a conversation I had with an American military intelligence officer who was having a supper of Jack Daniels and a Coca-Cola at a Kigali bar. I hear you're interested in genocide, the American said. Do you know what genocide is? I asked him to tell me. A cheese sandwich, he said. Write it down. Genocide is a cheese sandwich. I asked him how he figured that. What does anyone care about a cheese sandwich, he said. Genocide, genocide, genocide. Cheese sandwich, cheese, sandwich, cheese, sandwich. Who gives a shit? Crimes against humanity. Where's humanity? Who's humanity? You? Me? Did you see a crime committed against you? Hey, just 1 million Rwandans. Did you ever hear about the Genocide Convention? I said I had. That convention, the American at the bar said, makes a nice wrapping for a cheese sandwich.
Gosh, it's powerful, isn't it? And so poignant.
Yeah, and kind of leaves you confused as well.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, so kind of like I wasn't reading that out as just saying, and now we must do this. It just I think people's bitter experience lead them to actually want to be neutral sometimes, and then other people are hawks, other people are doves. But yeah, I think you have a lot more apathetic people in the middle of those two camps now.
Well, thank you for reading that. And we'll put a link on our website, so if you want to follow up and get hold of a copy of that book, you can do. What's your final choice of music?
My final choice of music is, for me, I never hear it played on the radio anymore. It's a long-lost Motown classic. It's called I Can't Get Back the Love I Feel For You by somebody called Rita Wright. And I think she was called Sharita Wright originally, and she was married to Stevie Wonder. I think they wrote Signed, Sealed, Delivered together, I think. Amazing voice. And my short story connected with this is that when, the Manics wrote a couple of songs with Kylie, I played her this track because I think, Sharita Wright and Kylie sound really alike. But I'm probably alone in that opinion, and I go, come on, we can do an amazing cover of this. But she didn't quite connect with the song. But on a muso tip, this is one of the best arrangements of all time. It's got drama, it's got warmth, it's delicate, it's got melancholy in it, and it's just so much skill on this track, apart from just the song and the voice itself, and I just love her voice. God rest her soul, she's not with us anymore. But I just love to hear this song on the radio.
Okay, Rita Wright. Rita Wright, and well, that's all of your choices, James Dean Bradfield. It has been a pleasure talking to you, as always. Just must ask you about 30-Year War, which you wrote before Margaret Thatcher died. Yeah. And it sort of takes us through the miners, Hillsborough.
It does. I mean, kind of like there's a thread through there. Obviously, it starts with the miners' strike and kind of the election of Thatcher, I suppose. It's not about Margaret Thatcher, it's about Thatcherism and its legacy. And yeah, it comes up to the present day. You've got Orgreave in there, you've got Hillsborough in there, you've got all the subsequent commissions that kind of showed, the kind of the thick veil of lies, that were told about, what happened at those places. And it comes up to the present day where we have the imbalance of, the front bench of the Tory party being mostly privately educated. And, hey, look, this is not a class war song. I'm just saying when things are out of balance, they're wrong. Joe Strummer was not a working class boy. That taught me a good lesson when I was young. But there was a balance in his band. And, there are many kind of Labour politicians that are privately educated. Got no problem with that. But when so many people that are privately educated, the majority of them in the Tory front bench are privately educated, and they're making decisions that affect very ordinary people's lives, then I think that's a bit messed up. You just want a bit of balance in life, and it feels out of whack at the moment.
Well, it's lovely to see you, James Dean Bradfield. Thank you very much indeed. And here's the Manics with Show Me the Wonder.